Welcome to Wedding Day Podcast with your hosts, Sonja Babich, CEO of Iron Diamond Media, a leading wedding resource featuring 7 localized wedding brands across the country, and Dan Riggs, photography and videography expert and founder of Summit Hill Studios. Come along as they travel from state to state to connect with the most creative and well-respected professionals in the wedding industry. Every episode will arm you with the hottest new trends, wedding day tips and details, and they'll show you all the joys of planning your perfect wedding day.
Hi, I'm Jenna Cully, owner of Linen Effects Minneapolis. I bet I can guess the third thing you did after getting engaged. Number 1, you called family and friends to share the good news. Number 2, you started a Pinterest board. Number 3, you realized that you have no idea how to bring that Pinterest board to life. That's where we come in. Let the design experts at Linen Effects take your ideas and bring them into reality. We have everything, including floor-length linens, charger plates, table settings, centerpieces, candles, pretty chairs, lounge furniture sets, and more to make your event picture perfect. Go to our website at lineneffects.com to schedule your appointment today. That's lineneffects.com and see your Pinterest board come to life.
Oh, we're doing this? So we start every show off, Carla, with the dance. Can you dance? I'm just kidding.
As long as it's Talking Heads or something, man.
No. This is the absolute first time we ever tried that. We're never going to do that again. Glad you guys are watching Wedding Day Podcast, listening on Spotify, Apple Music, all the places. We're here with Carla Callahan today in Seattle, Washington.
Yes.
Carla, you are from Young Vine Rentals, and we're going to talk all things rental, all things like you're an expert on that. So we're really excited to educate the listeners about what it is that you do.
Well, I've been, my introduction to the wedding industry was through cake. I've been running a wedding cake bakery in Seattle for almost 15 years. And that was my baby that I grew from nothing, from a red KitchenAid mixer in a 400 square foot little apartment in Oregon, and then moved it to Washington and actually took over a big commercial bakery, which was a very big leap to take as a small business about 10 years ago. And it grew from there. I still have the same space, the same commercial kitchen and studio in Lower Queen Anne. I've expanded my team since then. We survived a pandemic. And at some point, I realized that, one, I wanted to have other creative outlets in my life, and I wanted to keep them within the scope of the wedding industry. 2, I wanted to have a way to contribute something to the industry that was novel and that was innovative and that would offer a product or a service that had not yet touched the Seattle market, even if there are glimmers of it and established businesses like it elsewhere in the US and definitely elsewhere on the planet. And so that brought me into the rentals business, because the piece that is not covered by my telling you that I'm a wedding cake baker is that I actually have an educational background in environmental policy. I got a master's degree. Certainly did not provide many creative outlets for someone like me who actually, despite that career path, is a creative person and an artist. I am those things at heart. And I needed to do something with my hands. So the baking came in. Now the rentals aspect comes in, because it is a way for me to combine my great interests, my abiding passion for environmental issues and sustainability with what I already do, which is serve people having the biggest, most momentous day of their lives, at least so far.
Right.
And the rentals business itself is at base already a more sustainable option, because it's the circular economy. It's using things multiple times versus buying things for single use and then discarding them. Mm-hmm. So the wedding industry already has that as a base. And I think if we can focus on the idea that certain things that we may not consider to be reusable aspects of our weddings, and actually look at those as potentials for rental, like flowers, that's a really interesting and novel concept.
So this kind of becomes the whole package for you then, because you get to, you have passion in sustainability and you have passion in design. And so when you're designing a wedding cake or a cake in general, right? And then you're also designing basically just a bigger cake.
Yeah.
in a venue
Right.
type setting.
Right.
That's really
Like
cool.
arches.
Yeah.
You said it. Yeah, it's a great outlet for me because cake already requires, or at least doing cake at a high level, requires an incredible sense of proportion, an incredible sense of dealing with a fragile product, and a sense of color, a sense of scale, and a sense of being able to keep up with what looks new and current versus what is a dated trend. And of course, there's things from long ago that are coming back. Like we can have a whole other discussion about vintage piped buttercream cakes, which are back.
You just have to keep a storage unit for all the things that happen in 2024 for
Yeah.
2044.
Sing it.
And you can just bring them right back. That's ultimate sustainability.
I should just be building those pieces now and just stashing them.
Yeah, like when I should probably kept my closet, from middle school, because there's some pieces I'm actually like, why did I donate that? Why did
Stonewash
I
high-rise
give that
jeans.
away?
You and me both, Sonia. Like my little 90s chokers from when I was a teenager, and like my Doc Martens,
Yeah.
and like my baggy jeans. I'm such a millennial. I still wear skinny jeans, which is such a giveaway.
Yeah.
I love my
No.
skinny jeans too.
know.
I'm
Don't wanna
not
give
giving
'em
them
up.
up. Well, I'm sitting here in a jean skirt. So.
Which actually is trade 90s. It's so 90s to do that.
So
It's great.
good.
Yeah.
But a lot of patience goes into your gifts that you have as an expert, and vision as well, because you hear the vision of couples planning their day and how they picture their day, and then you help communicate it. It's really that taking that images from their Pinterest boards, which I'm sure you don't mind seeing the Pinterest boards, right?
I love seeing Pinterest boards. It also informs what I think is beautiful, or it creates an interplay between what I already think is beautiful and what is now and of the moment. And if you're doing reusable pieces, there are actually some interesting considerations there. It becomes part of the business model to determine what will be rentable, what will be the most rentable item or product going forward, that if I build it now, that in the year or two to come, that those pieces are going to be rented out and reused. Will they still be relevant?
Yeah.
Or are we just reiterating kind of dated concepts? So the one thing with Young Vine is, of course, if you have a rental business, there's lots of pieces that are pre-made, and they're not built from the ground up each time, because that is the realm of my wonderful, hardworking, fresh floral colleagues. They are actually I have so much more respect for fresh flowers and florists now, even than I did in my 10 years of running a commercial wedding cake bakery and 14 years of making wedding cakes. And I already respected how hard they work, but really it is an enormous challenge logistically, in terms of labor, in terms of product cost, and in terms of the perishability and fragility of those fresh flowers, to be doing large floral installations at a wedding.
Well, and
It's
they have to start
huge.
from the ground up every single time. They don't,
And then those things get discarded at the end of the night, and then we start again next weekend,
Right.
right? With fresh product, new mechanics, labor, new setup, and you've got hours and hours on site to install those things. But fresh flowers, there's
got feelings.
product loss, right? There's wilting, there's things that need to be touched up, and you can't necessarily set up a huge arbor with 3,000 stems in it, 5 hours ahead, and then have it be sitting out in 90-degree blazing sun and someone's beautiful garden wedding setup, right?
And so these are things that you educate the client about, like, okay, what is your venue situation? Are you going to have extreme heat? And then you're
And
able
fresh
to,
florists have to keep those things in mind. So the thing with our model is that we're building things out of faux flowers, and we can talk at length. I can talk at length about that. They are, in our case, which is not common among silk floral or faux floral rental businesses, at least so far as I've found. But in our case, they are the finest faux florals on the planet. They are the ones that look real. They're roses that have thorns on their stems, that have veining on their petals. They're coated with a latex or silicone polymer so that if you touch them, they actually feel soft. They don't feel crunchy, and they don't photograph, which is important because my husband is a wedding photographer, so I do think about photography. They photograph matte, and they photograph flawlessly. They don't look like the shiny Hobby Lobby plastic flowers.
so we don't have to,
Yeah, so going into that, when you're selecting your flowers and you're showing those Pinterest boards, you're like, I would love these peonies. It's November.
Yeah, you can have whatever you want if it's a premium permanent botanical, right? It is not subject to the seasons.
Yes, so that's what I'm getting into. So when you're coming with your Pinterest board to show your florist or your rental company or your designers, show the dream vision of these are the florals and rentals that I am envisioning on my wedding day.
Yep.
Are those flowers in season? That is a key.
It's so tricky for fresh florists.
Yes,
right?
and a lot of engaged couples don't know that flowers are not in season. They actually sometimes are not in season, and your wedding's in October. In Minnesota, you have to pay a hot penny if you want peonies, because peony season in the Midwest is, and I think it's generally everywhere, depending, again, I'm not a florist expert, but it is end of May to possibly the 4th of July to have fresh peonies at your wedding. So that's why June weddings are very popular in Minnesota and the Midwest, because they want all the peonies. Again, June bride, low down the peonies. Peonies, same thing.
Yeah.
But
that's a great segue into some of the things that are wonderful about renting flowers. And if you're choosing a company that's actually sourcing really beautiful looking flowers that are intended to be realistic and are intended to look premium and look expensive, and not to look as though you compromised on your wedding vision and your Pinterest vision by choosing something plastic, that we can give you things that aren't subject to the vagaries of season. We can execute certain things that may not be possible in a particular floral budget. That's something that I've gleaned from, the years and months of talking to my floral colleagues, is that often these large installations, because they're logistically so stressful, they involve so much product cost and so much labor, they are well beyond the budget of a lot of regular couples getting married who already have these, laundry lists of other costs involved in their wedding. And so those big installations get jettisoned in favor of needing to protect, your home your down payment on your first home, or your honeymoon fund, or just your catering bill.
some take out loans.
Yeah. And we're actually interested in that angle as well, because as a rental company, there's a few things that we can offer. We can offer a cost savings on the fresh floral equivalent of a large arch. We can actually offer the ability for a couple to collaborate with us and a fresh florist, because we don't deal in centerpieces, we don't make bouquets, we don't do any personal flowers. Our specialty is the large installations where we can save you the most money, we can save you the most carbon cost, right? We can actually reduce the footprint of your wedding flowers the most if we're doing these large installations.
So I'm going to step in right there. So can you explain what an installation is? Because that is actually one of the biggest trends right now, is if you don't have an installation, you're kind of not having a really glammy wedding, a trendy wedding, and every installation is different. So that's just such a big thing right now for the design of a wedding. So can you explain what an installation is?
Sure. I'll explain it from the perspective of what we do.
Yes.
And we focus exclusively on arbors and arches and installations that create a mood for the actual ceremony. So that would include aisle flowers or aisle meadows that you can line your aisle with and make it feel as though you're walking through a meadow of flowers.
I
as
love
you meet
that.
the love of your life at the end. I mean, it's the most romantic thing
Sounds
you can
very
imagine.
Nicholas Sparks.
And arbors and arches like that are typically, 6, 8, 10 feet tall and are wide enough to frame the couple at the altar, are typically built on large frames, and they have complex mechanics. So there's powder-coated steel frames that go behind them. They're sandbagged, or they're protected against getting knocked over by the wind, or knocked over by someone kind of coming up to them and hanging out, or playing around with them
Or just
too
taking
hard.
photos in front of them.
Yeah, exactly. A photo booth guest with a glass of wine in hand, So we are interested in making sure the mechanics are really sturdy, that they hang out and stay there for as long as they need to, and then they can be repurposed later and moved to somewhere else in maybe the reception. They can go behind the head table. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is in the spirit of sustainability, you can move that from the ceremony site. And
Totally.
Put it, that's
we
great.
love
That's
that, and we're promoting that idea as keenly as we can with our couples. That, it's a kind of a meme right now about the bride math, and how, the math on if you spend $2,000 renting a gigantic circle arch, that would have cost you a lot more than that if it was all fresh flowers. But if it's $2,000 and then you can use it for your ceremony and you can use it for your reception, then it was only $1,000, right?
So when they come to you with like the art or installation, can they present you an idea with how they want it to look?
So we take inspiration from anywhere. A couple can send us a Pinterest. A florist can send us something of like, I work with personal flowers and bouquets only, and I don't do large arches. And I am working with a couple that wants to do something like this. Can you offer this? And we use that to inform future pieces that we build that are actually in our schedule of things to create, rental pieces to design. And or we can use that to customize pieces that we already have. And any florist or I will tell you that it takes about 24 flowers on each side of a set of pillars that would frame an altar at a ceremony to radically transform the look of those pillars by customizing them with a different color than what they already have. So it doesn't take much tweaking. So again, from the sustainability aspect, we don't have to build a completely new piece from scratch each time. We can actually take the things we have and or add something to the list that we know is going to re-rent. It will be something that other couples might want, and we can add that to our collection on that basis.
And I think that's important for disengaged couples to understand. Of course, we're all businesses, right? So the futuristic brain is what can be trendy, reusable, so for rental companies to keep it in stock and available also for more wedding couples to utilize again, right?
And I've spent a lot of time and effort in curating that initial rental collection accordingly, knowing that we are going to be renting to different types of couples with radically different taste, but that there's an underlying trend or look that is being sought after a lot of the time, which is the neutral flowers, the champagne and taupe and ivory, the blushes, the mauves. And then because we're in the Pacific Northwest, there are lots of couples that are looking for abundant greenery and ferns and a natural look that brings the forest into their wedding or makes it more organic, right? And brings in the garden feel. So we've got rentals that are tailored to that too.
Everything that you just mentioned just now wanted to make me sneeze a little bit. And what I realized is...
Pollen.
What I realized is allergies.
Yeah.
So if you have crafted floral, you don't have to worry about allergies either.
It's another piece of what is interesting about what we're doing, that there's lots of people now that are increasingly sensitive to pollen, and they get big histamine responses when they're in the presence of certain flowers and certain foliage. And they also don't have any fragrance or scent. We don't artificially scent our flowers either, like some faux floral companies do. I've never felt the need for that. I think it's kind of contrary to the spirit of what we're doing, which is try to reduce as much of our chemical impact as we can. And that brings me to the subject of, why would you even rent flowers that are fake and that actually are made of plastic, right? A lot of our flowers are. So that's an interesting piece.
Let's go in the breakdown of the 101 of fake flowers. What are the different types of flowers?
Faux flowers.
Well, let's
right?
be real
about them.
Faux flowers.
I actually like calling them permanent botanicals or artificial flowers.
Sounds very fancy.
Sonja and I don't have that vocabulary.
Permanent
so
botanicals is a great euphemism.
You say it so fast too.
I think about this a lot, Sonja. It's on my mind all the time.
Yeah, so
I've had
break
lots
it
of
down
time
for
to
us.
practice the terms.
Yeah, so break it down.
Yeah, it's a piece that needs a bit of explanation, because there is a trend in the industry across the planet for couples to be buying fake flowers for their wedding. There are companies that sell them and they're low cost. And the idea is that those are single-use artificial flowers that get styled as garlands down a table or bouquets or boutonnieres, and then what happens to those afterward, because they were purchased and they are single use. And if the couple didn't have a plan at the time of purchasing them for how they were going to pass them along, then many of those flowers end up in the garbage. And let me tell you, a fake flower that is a single use item is actually a way higher carbon cost and has a much bigger carbon footprint than a fresh flower bouquet or a fresh flower
So when you say
boutonniere.
carbon, what do you mean by carbon?
So when we're talking about sustainability in weddings, one of the metrics that we are interested in is the carbon footprint or the carbon cost of producing that item of shipping it around the world, of making it so that that piece got made and now it's at your wedding. And then the cost of what happens to that item once your wedding is over, because let's be real, your wedding is just one day in your life. And it is one of those things where when the wedding is over, there are some consequences to the choices that you made. And that if you made different choices before the wedding day happened, those consequences would obviously be different. And one of those things is your fresh flowers, which if they end up in the garbage or even the compost at the end of the night, that's a consideration. I will tell you that the stats are pretty sad about even something that people consider to be a natural and biodegradable product, like a wedding bouquet or a bunch of wedding centerpieces. You would think after your wedding, they just go in the compost, right? And they break down into nutrients and then they get used to grow new plants.
That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. That's actually only 4% of all the wedding flowers in the US that are actually composted correctly at the end of an event.
So if they end up in the
96% of
garbage?
them end up in the garbage. And it's because often those flowers are installed into certain mechanics like single-use floral foam or cages or chicken wire or things like that, where a tired, hard-working wedding floral team or wedding breakdown and teardown team may not necessarily have the time or the effort or the education to go and separate out all those individual pieces from, separate garbage from compostables or recyclables from compostables. And what most often happens, because we do need to sometimes face the reality of our industry, is that if those go in the garbage, they're going to be compacted by a trash compactor. They are not, those flowers, even though they're biodegradable, once they're in the trash and they've been compacted, they're not actually going to be interacting with air and water and microbes in a way that's going to allow them to break down organically. So they're going to break down anaerobically, right? They're breaking down without the presence of oxygen, which means they're going to degrade into methane. And methane is 85 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So you want those flowers to go into the compost. You want them to break down. You want them to reduce the carbon impact of the wedding. But in 96% of cases, they will go in the garbage and they will become methane. And that's going to make our global warming problem, our climate change problem, that much worse with every single wedding.
So when they go into compost, how are they reused? In gardens and...
Yeah, right.
Okay.
In all those different ways. I don't know that I'm an expert on that part, on what happens to the compost, but it's certainly better than having them actually degrade in the trash, right, in the landfill.
Right.
So our goal is for people, if they're going to use faux flowers as an alternative in their weddings, that those faux flowers are not single use, because the only way that we can reduce the carbon footprint of those flowers from start to finish, from the time that they're made to the time that they leave that wedding in whatever form, is to reuse them many, many times over. And as they get reused, their carbon footprint shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And in our case, we can actually take those flowers apart. We can take all of our mechanics apart of all of our pieces when they become dated or when we need to retire certain aspects or styles of designs. And then we can reuse those flowers in different arrangements, different pieces, which means not a single stem at Young Vine will ever go in the garbage unless it's actually damaged. And in these large installations, they don't get subject to the same kind of damage that a bouquet is that's getting tossed, or like personal flowers that are being handled at sort of closer contact. So that part is extremely important in our model, because if you're thinking about how a lot of the fresh flowers come to us from around the world, many of them are grown in Colombia, they're grown on big farms in South America, they're grown elsewhere in the world. Fresh flowers have about 3 to 6 days from the time that they come out of the field, from the time they get harvested to the time they need to be in a vase or in a centerpiece at your wedding, and that's their optimal life. That means that if they're coming from outside of a distance that could be driven by truck, they need to be flown by air, and that is 60 times the carbon of putting something on a ship. Most faux flowers from around the planet, they get put on a ship because they don't have to be flown.
No
There's
shelf
no
life.
rush.
Yeah.
They're not going to die in transit.
Right.
There's no loss there. They don't need all the elaborate internal packaging and cellophane and plastic wrap and cardboard and all the things that fresh flowers do when they're in transit from around the globe.
Are there limitations to what you can do as far as, like, are there more challenges with certain venues than there are with others?
For sure. Yeah. With big installations, especially if they're ours and they're pre-made and they're not being built from the ground up on site, we need to, bring them in, and we need to get them through a doorway, or we need to get them into an elevator, whether it be a freight elevator or up a staircase or something, and install them, which there's risks and benefits to these things, right? The benefit is that it takes us about 20 minutes to install a large, like 9-foot diameter circular arch covered in flowers versus building it on site, which a florist will tell you is anything from 2 to 3 or 4 hours plus a team of 6, stuffing flowers in and processing flowers and cleaning up afterward.
I have experienced a speed video of a floral installation
amazing,
in
right?
a very common venue in the Twin Cities, and it was about 8 individuals working steadily for this amazing installation. It was award-winning. It was absolutely stunning. But so for your product, is it common to do it off-site, or is it actually better to do it on-site with full flowers?
So our pieces are pre-built. They're already on their frames. They're already styled. They mostly just need a little bit of fluffing on site to repair or replace any flowers that shook loose during their trip over to the venue in a truck or a van, right?
A couple of bolts, maybe a little
bit of zhuzhing, like reflexing certain rose petals back, or making sure that something that's shifted or swung out of place is now like perfectly photo ready. But that's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of effort it would take for us to build them right there. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking to the engaged couple that doesn't work with a rental designer, company, and they purchase full flowers. What would you recommend what to do with them after they're done with those full flowers? Where should they bring them, sell them? What do you recommend?
That is probably a topic for an offer up or Facebook Marketplace, or if there's wedding markets. I actually don't know, because we aren't in the business of passing on our flowers to anybody else. But for those who are buying from companies and intending for single use, I would say definitely find an outlet, find a Craigslist outlet or an equivalent to pass them on to the next couple, and make sure that those don't end up in the garbage, right?
So being a publishing company that we promote all the lovely wedding professionals that go into a wedding day, and definitely not a DIY wedding.
Not recommended.
So I love that you were sharing that you actually incorporate real flowers into some of your installation designs.
Just one type of install, and that's the aisle flowers.
Okay, interesting. Share more.
Because we feel if we incorporated fresh flowers into really anything else, especially the large pieces, we'd be negating our mission to save on the costs and and reduce carbon and save people money. Well, I already said that part, but save people on time for setup as well, because all those flowers also have to be processed and cared for and water picked and all the things that a fresh florist would do. So for us, the aisle flowers are an interesting feature and an interesting place to add a couple of stems a piece that are fresh.
The aisle flowers during the ceremony.
Yep, and that's just for psychology, right? Because the guests are right there.
Yeah.
And the flowers are right there. So they're looking down over my aisle flower arrangement, and they're just admiring them, and they look amazing because there's 12 or 20 pieces that are lining this aisle. It looks like the couple is walking down a meadow, you know? But if you're the guest and you're right over them, I want to insert the fragrance and the realism of an actual legitimately fresh real life flower, because you get the psychological effect. It's almost a trick of if a guest is looking down and they see enough in those flowers and they smell enough beautiful fragrance from stock or roses or something like that, that they think, oh, what lovely flowers. Then they won't even question the integrity or the realism of the rest of that arrangement. And that's also why we focus on big installations, because our pieces are meant to make your photos look insane. They're meant to make your wedding look absolutely gorgeous and create a really romantic mood and lush and abundant floral context for you in which to get married. And they're not right in people's faces in general. Our installations are being interacted with by the guests at a distance, which again is going to make them take for granted that they're real flowers and not question whether they're faux or not. We just did Seattle Wedding Show a couple of days ago, and the overwhelming number of comments, I mean, there were 500 of them, I guess, were from people who had to come up to our booth and literally smell the flowers or feel them with their own hands. Some asked permission to touch, some didn't. And they were trying to convince their brain, of whether their
Totally.
suspicion was right or wrong.
I was guilty of that this weekend at the
Right?
Arizona wedding show. Totally was guilty.
Yeah, and it's a sign of how far, faux floral technology has come in recent years, right? They're not your mama's like 1970s red plastic roses.
So how
That
far?
you can get a quick trip.
Yeah.
Yes. So how quick trip? How far should they
Exactly.
book or start their process with you or any floral designer? What would you recommend?
The main thing for us is date availability because we have one-off pieces. We're a relatively young company. We also are not necessarily interested in mass volume of accumulating rental pieces. We want to make things special. We want to focus on quality over quantity with the designs that we do and have a lot of flowers stuffed into each design to make them really special. So those pieces are one of a kind. And if they are rented on a day that you are getting married and you want the same piece, that piece is gone.
That's not happening.
And I may long-term make duplicates of certain pieces if they rent out a lot so that we don't have to disappoint people and say no a lot. We don't necessarily want to do that.
No, we don't want to turn away a business because
right.
again, we are businesses as well.
Right?
Yeah.
But it actually makes it special that there's only a few of them. And also then that for your wedding, it's a one-off piece and it's been customized with a couple of extra flowers to make it suit your palette. Nobody else is going to get that exact same iteration of that arrangement. And that the date availability is key. It's not necessarily my design time.
And with your specialty, it is a little different than a fresh florist because a lot of fresh florists want to see what is in as well, what's fresh, what's hot. And
What's seasonal, what's
yeah,
available.
like it's still good to have there's 1 or 2 appointments with your florist, but when it gets closer, like definitely the 3-month mark, that's when you should really lock in, I feel, with your florist, with the design and the palette and what's available,
Yep.
what has had a hard winter or
And
certain
that-
season or any effects.
That model assumes that they've already reserved the date.
Yes.
And now they're just finalizing the details. So our model
Exactly.
is relatively similar to that we don't necessarily need you to select an exact rental yet at the time of booking. It's better if you do. We can suggest things to you if you're not committed to one or another rental. You just know that you want our flowers at your wedding. You want our installations. If you are undecided yet between, the champagne and taupe one or the ferns with white flowers or the burgundy and, Merlot one, then we would take a retainer from you and reserve your date. And then we make it so that you're on the list that if there's certain rentals you want and other people want them, that we give you first option to reserve that particular rental. But at least we know we've reserved the truck capacity, the team capacity to go and set up those rentals on site for you on your actual date.
Thank you so much. Carla Callahan from Young Vine Rentals here in Seattle, Washington, where we are today. I learned a ton.
You were so educational. I am just flabbergasted by all the word carbon and how it just flows off your tongue so easily. And
Thanks,
it's
Sonia.
making me really think about that and actually to not throw my flowers away.
Yeah.
Like to actually bring them somewhere to compost them.
Yeah.
Seriously, that is a big takeaway that I had today. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, letting me share a little piece of it. There's so many more things we could say. We could do 10 more podcasts.
And we will. We'll do another
yeah.
one with you. You're so knowledgeable.
You're so
it's
knowledgeable.
really good. Really
I
good.
appreciate
Yeah,
your support of this interesting way to bring some novelty and innovation to an aspect of the industry that really could use a little, shaking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in. Of course, you can find us on Spotify, Apple,
Yes.
YouTube, of course, across all of the 7 brands, which again is California Wedding Day, Oregon Wedding Day, Washington Wedding Day, Arizona Bride, Minnesota Bride, Washington Wedding Day, and Nebraska Wedding Day. Did I say those correctly?
wedding- I'm sure. I don't know.
I think I need to say them one more time. I think I called it Wisconsin Wedding Day, and that is not the right name.